Today I'm talking about a topic that I know for sure is on the minds of so many listeners. So many small business owners that I work with or connect with online are building a side hustle while still working full-time employed, with a hope to be full-time self-employed. I know how hard this is. I totally see you. I see where you are. I know the hustle and I know how hard it is because I did it too. Today I want to completely uncover that journey of going from full-time employed to full-time self-employed. I want to talk about what I did right down to the numbers and everything. Yeah, let's get into it. My story at the time now, we're going back, 11 years ago now? It was 2014. I was a branch manager for a retail high street bank. I had worked my way right up in the bank from being a cashier to being the branch manager, and quite frankly, I hated it. I hated it. I hated everything about it. I hated the job. I hated the office I had that was stuck through the back. There was no natural light. Some days could go, I hadn't seen outside at all since arriving at work. I just hated the full setup. I hated the full thing. Hated the job, and I thought, this can't be it for me. I cannot do this forever. I'm a very creative person. Love being outdoors. So aside from that, there was just other elements of the job that I just couldn't do. I couldn't do anymore. And driving home from work one day, it's so funny because I remember vividly exactly where I was driving. I remember the road I was driving on. I was just about to go over a speed bump. I don't know if that's in any way was a sign, this whole bump in the road. And I thought, fuck this. I cannot do this for the rest of my life. I cannot do this for even, X amount more years. I cannot do this. I hate this. This cannot be life for me. So I had a complete fuck it moment. And I knew I wanted to do something different. I knew I wanted to work for myself. Rewind a tad, if we go back a few years, I did have a similar moment previously, a good few years before that point in 2014. And of course, when I'm recording this today, this is 2025. So it's been 11 years now. But sorry, digress. Rewind from that fuck it moment. I'm probably going to say that a few times through this episode today, so I hope you're fine with the F word. There was another time when I was working for the bank and wanted to learn a creative profession, something that I enjoyed that would enable me to do it for myself at some point in life. That was the sort of goal. And at that point, I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. I would have loved it to have been photography at that point. I've always been a keen photographer, a keen hobby photographer. And so that was the first thing in my mind. But at that point, the job that I was looking for that had, an income from it, but also on the job training and whatever just wasn't there. It wasn't there. I looked high and low, and that opportunity just wasn't there. But one day I had seen an advert in the local newspaper. It's very random, for a trainee florist position. And I just took it. And sometimes you just have to follow your gut in life, don't you? And just go where it takes you. And that's where this took me. So rewind a few years from this fuck it moment. I had left the bank, had taken a job in a florist shop and had did a college course alongside it, and I absolutely adored it. I loved it. I wasn't too keen in the day-to-day floristry stuff like bouquets for birthdays and whatnot. I really enjoyed the bigger stuff. So when we were doing weddings, where we really sat down, had a design consultation and really got into the nitty-gritty of designing something a bit different, I really, really enjoyed that. However, not to focus too much on that part, that could probably be a whole other episode in itself, but I did that. I completed my floristry course, got a qualification in floristry, got so much experience in it, but life at the time, life changed, threw me a bit of a curveball at the time. I needed more money and I went back to banking. So now fast forward, so where we are at that point, 2014. I'm thinking I cannot do this career in banking for much longer, basically. Like, I want out and I want to do something creative and I want to be my own boss. I could not have been any clearer on that. It was just burning within me and I couldn't ignore it any longer. And it came to mind, that I had this floristry experience. It was something I enjoyed. It was something creative. It was something I could do that I was good at and that I could do that for myself. And so from that point forward, like, it's as if, I just knew something had to change and I was going to change it. And so I did. Now it was as if, like, I didn't care what it took It was happening. I was absolutely doing it. It was a very strange but very liberating experience and profound point in my life, to be honest, because it completely changed my career trajectory from that moment onwards. It moved me towards a goal that I've had since I started working. I always had this desire to be self-employed. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to execute it. But it was at this point here, I was like, nope, I'm done. I know I'm done, and I know that from this moment onwards, I am moving towards this goal. However, here's the thing, and here's the point where I know lots of you listening are at. You're working, building a side hustle, but you're feeling like you're never going to be able to leave your 9 to 5 and pursue your side hustle as a business full time because the money's just not there. That's the most common obstacle I hear from small business owners that I speak with every day through my mentorship, through my community on Instagram, through lots of the various avenues that I communicate with small business owners. A lot of them are building something really awesome but worrying and wondering if it's ever going to manifest into a full-time career that provides a full-time salary, because, you know, we've all got bills and stuff to pay, which I did as well. So I'm just going to get into real how I did it today. It was fantastic reflecting back on this for me, for this exercise, to talk about it today and really bring into life all the different areas that I completely focused on in order to make the dream work. First off, I should probably say I'm going to tell you what I did, but then at the end I'm going to tell you what I would go back and do differently. Okay, so not necessarily everything that I did here. It got me where I wanted to go. Could it have been a bit easier? Yes, there's things I could have done to make it a bit easier, and I'm going to go for that as well. First off, I got laser focused on what I wanted to do. Wedding floristry. That's it. I did not want to offer bouquets for everyday use, for birthdays, for anniversary, that kind of things, for 2 reasons. One, I didn't enjoy it. Secondly, I couldn't commit to it. I was still working full time in my banking role. I couldn't possibly have taken calls during the day for bouquets and made bouquets and had flowers in to do that and did deliveries and whatever. It wouldn't have worked. So I got laser focused that wedding floristry was absolutely what I wanted to do. That's it, nothing else. I got really clear on how I wanted to do it. I had a shed in my garden. Yep, just a simple shed that I was going to work from as a workshop, and I had a laptop, and that was going to be my communication station. And it did. So yeah, the thing that I would have, I'm going to get into this later. I wasn't clear my ideal client at this point. I'm going to talk about that in great depth later, because this would have made this startup process so much easier. But at this point, that was what I was focused on. Next thing I looked at, which I thought was really important, I thought you've got to have a logo, right? You've got to have a logo to get out there. Now, I actually discussed this in a branding episode with Emily Coulson, that how when I started up in business, I thought the logo was the be all and end all. Like, you didn't even have a real business if you didn't have a logo, which I know sounds ridiculous, but that's where my head was at the time. I had to set up my branding and give my business a name, of course. Now, gave my business a name. Very little thought went into this, by the way. I brainstormed a few ideas for the name of my business with friends and family, like literally just to and forth messages back and forth. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? On text and WhatsApp and whatever, and then came up with the name of my business, which was the Floral Design Boutique. Again, would I have changed that? Yes, absolutely. It sounds more like a shop. The Floral Design Boutique sounds like a boutique store that you're going to visit, right? And that wasn't the case. So yes, I'll talk about that later, how I would have changed that. But at that time, gave my business a name, got in touch with a graphic designer friend, hi Gareth, to design a logo for me. Basically just saying make it colourful. That was it. That was as much thought went into the colours and the logo. Colourful, fun. It was not targeted at any particular market or anything at all. Not even particularly weddings, to be honest. It was colourful and fun and things that I liked. That was it. Now, yes, I would change that as well. However, I do ultimately still believe that get it out there is good and you can make it perfect later. I was on a mission and I got it out there and I made it perfect later. So branding wise, gave the business a name, got a logo designed. And next thing for me was social media. So I set up an Instagram and Facebook profile. Now we're going back 11 years here, so it was, same but different. It has evolved a lot, but at the same time, not much at all. I had used social media for years personally at that point, and I thought, how hard could it be to do it for a business as well? At that time, it was a lot of posting pictures of your dinner, your dog. At that time, I didn't even have a dog at that time, actually. So yeah, nights out probably was the biggest thing there. And just random stuff, like you just posted on there. There was no plan behind it, obviously, for your personal socials. And in a way, I naively thought I could just continue that into business as well, but that was not the case. So that will certainly be covered later. Now, finance is something I know that lots of you want to talk about. It's a really big crux of this episode is the fact that you would love to leave your 9 to 5 and pursue your business full time, but the money is just not there. So I'm going to tell you what I did money wise a little bit now and a little bit later. But what I did to start up was I had a £500 overdraft on my personal bank account that I had never used. It was just sitting there, and I used that as my startup capital, if you like. I used it initially to buy stock and so that I could make mock-ups of bouquets and arrangements and whatnot for weddings so that I could photograph them. That was my photography hobby coming in there again. So that I could photograph them to use them as examples of my work on social media. That was the main thing I used that money for at the start, was to buy stock to do that. So this £500 overdraft was to be my capital for setting up. Now when it came to, so next thing then was pricing. So when it came to pricing myself, I was full of self-doubt, which I know so many small business owners are at the very beginning. You're thinking, are you any good at this? Are you worth it? You've got imposter syndrome. Who does she think she is syndrome creeping in big time. And you're reluctant to charge what industry says that this is worth because you don't know if you're actually worth it yet. I think that's probably hitting the nail on the head there. So I was very much at that. So I went in really, really low with my prices. You know, some bridal bouquets I was doing for like £50 where they should have been at least 3 times the price of that. But what I wanted was, I wanted experience, I wanted clients, I wanted photographs of the work, I wanted reviews, you know, like I wanted to get my name out there, and this is how I wanted to do it. So the pricing at the very start wasn't, like, making a profit wasn't huge for me, covering costs was enough for me. So that's how I did that at the very start. So that's how I did that. So I did quote very cheap in the start and did the work for very, very cheaply. Now I would say that's the sort of, is that 4 things? So that was, yep. So started with my branding, social media, finance, sort of capital, pricing. Yeah, I think that's the 4 main sort of things I focused on at the start. And I cracked on with this strategy for probably around 6 months or so. And it worked. It worked. My name did indeed get out there. Bookings were coming thick and fast. I was busy. I was all over the place delivering weddings. It was hard work, you know. I opened my laptop at 6 a.m. most mornings, and I'm not a morning person, so that was not something that I found easy at all. But the motivation kept me going. The motivation made it easy. And no kids back then either, of course. But yes, I would open my laptop before my day job in the morning to answer inquiries and send out quotes, do my social media posts. And same again after work, I would open the laptop after work as well. And of course, during work at my day job, if I would check my emails and see that someone wanted to book, I mean, what an absolute buzz. And that just spurred me on to open the laptop again after work. So there was a huge, huge drive behind this. You know, this was working, it was working, and it was exhausting, but it was working. I hear so many people now saying, I feel like we're coming away from it a bit more now, but saying that it doesn't have to be hard to set up a business, but that wasn't my experience. And although there's a few things I would change to make it easier, I don't know if that actual part could have been easier. Especially in wedding floristry, it's a very, very physical job. So my Thursday nights would have been spent conditioning flowers. So that means receiving all your flowers in, stripping every stem, cutting every stem, cleaning buckets, filling buckets, making sure your flowers are all in perfect condition. Then Friday nights after work were spent making up my bridal bouquets, my bridesmaid bouquets, arrangements for the next day, all the prep. Sometimes early Saturday mornings would have been doing smaller things like buttonholes and corsages and whatnot. Then Saturdays were spent travelling to destinations all over Scotland, which was a bit I really, really enjoyed. Got to see some amazing wedding destinations, wedding venues. Saturdays were often spent delivering weddings and whatnot, and then honestly the rest of Saturday and Sunday were just spent panicking, thinking I hadn't done a good job, and just waiting on the bride or groom to come back and say those flowers were awful, like they fell apart, you know, which never happened. I'm glad to say it never happened. But that's another tip as well. Like, do you know what? Try your best to just enjoy a job well done. If you've just held an event or delivered a service or, you know, a session or whatever it might be, and you know it's went well and you've got good feedback, please just take that and enjoy it, because like, see all the time I spent really worrying, sleepless nights, thinking, even though I dropped the bridal bouquet off to the bride and she like gasped with delight and perhaps, you know, cried with delight, I would still spend the rest of that day thinking, what if she secretly hated it? Or the table arrangements, what if they crashed and fell on a table of dinner guests in the evening? Like, I mean, it was awful, and there was really no need for it. So if you do that too, I see you, I feel you, but please try not to do it. It's not worth it. It's a total waste of energy. So before I get into the nitty gritty of the finances and what I did there to be able to leave my job, I'll talk about why I was so busy, like what I was doing with social media. I only had Instagram and Facebook at the time, and Facebook was a huge driver of clients for me. Whether it was the type of clients I particularly wanted or not, I'll cover in the what I'll do differently section. But that's what I was doing. I was posting every day. So that was part of my morning routine. I would get up, open the laptop, answer any emails, put out some quotes, and then I would post the socials in the morning. And I was only targeting people who were getting married. Like, there was no other ideal client avatar at this point. I was targeting anyone who was getting married and who wanted flowers for their wedding. Like, I would do that for you. I was using Facebook groups, like so many Facebook groups. So I was using Instagram and Facebook every day, every single day. Now, there wasn't even stories or anything at that point. It was just your grids, I'm sure. And we were heavily into filters, everyone at that point. But as well as Instagram and Facebook, I was putting myself everywhere where brides would be. Online forums were still a thing at that point. There was a lot of bridal forums where you could just go in and have sort of chats. Sometimes it was like a wedding magazine that would run these forums, so I could join there, advertise in there for free. Facebook groups, oh my gosh, so many Facebook groups. There were thousands of Facebook groups for getting married to help you, to share tips where you could do, people could advertise, you could like sell off stuff you'd had for your wedding, like vases or whatever it might be. You could do anything in here in relation to your wedding. I was in so many of them, and I don't recall there being any like limits to posting advertising or whatever, so I was just posting in there regularly and got so many inquiries from there. And as time went on, I was able to post client reviews in there. You know, if just the bride had said, oh, these flowers are the most beautiful flowers I've ever seen, or like Amanda was so easy to deal with, you know, and I started posting stuff like that in Facebook groups as well. So Facebook groups were a huge driver of where I got my clients from there and then, and daily posting on Instagram and social media. The next thing to talk about then is money. And this is the thing lots of people don't talk about, don't they not? They don't talk about the financial side of it. Like, okay, that's great, you left your full-time job to go full-time self-employed, but how on earth did you make up that salary? Like, how did it work when just now you might not be earning anything from your business, or just like a little side income? Like, how? So first off, I had to set up my profit structure. Now, I was in a few florist groups, you know, industry style groups where you could learn different things. So I picked up a few tips here and there about how to do stuff like profit structure and whatnot, and how to order flowers and best timings and all that kind of thing, you know. So that's definitely something I did. I did get absorb a lot of free tips and ideas and whatnot from industry groups, and something I learned there was about how to set up your best profit structure. So learning a bit about that, the best profit structure for me at the time was, from every booking, 30% of the total cost went on buying stock, 50% went to me as profit, and 20% was reinvested back into the business. Now, I didn't put away for tax at that point, so again, lesson learned, but ultimately that came out of this 20% that was reinvested back in the business. It's a huge fear to leave your steady income employed job to go self-employed, a huge fear, and it was for me as well. You know, I had rent to pay, I had bills to pay, I needed to know my income, what it was, and that it was steady and secure, which is a huge ask from self-employment. So I knew there was no way that I could just leave my 9-to-5 corporate job where I knew I was getting paid every month and jump into self-employment with it being erratic, which it was at this point. I was very busy and I was bringing in money, but it wasn't enough to cover my salary. And I knew for me personally, I couldn't leave without some sort of a cushion behind me. So I did a deal with myself that I would review leaving my job and going full-time self-employed if and when I could save up 3 months salary, so 3 months equivalent of my salary in my corporate job. So what I did was, obviously every booking I get, 50% was going into an account which was pure profit, 30% was spent on expenses to do the job, 20% was being reinvested back in the business. And I didn't spend a penny from the business on anything I didn't need to, like as in the profit I was making, just saved. You know, I was still in my full-time income. I didn't need this extra income. So I went purely saving on having 3 months salary saved up before I would even consider leaving my 9 to 5. If I could get 3 months salary in the bank and get the business with weddings booked out in advance so that I knew what income to expect to an extent, consistent inquiries and a high conversion rate, if I could meet these goals, I would leave my 9 to 5. And so that's what I did. So roughly around 8 months, I'd say about 8 to 10 months since I started the business, kept going exactly as I described. I was working super hard. I was around the clock, you know, weekends were wedding weekend. There's a lot of sacrifices to be made, a lot of nights out I couldn't make and whatnot, but I was laser focused that I wanted my life to change. Your work is a huge part of your life, and this was a part that I wanted to change so badly. I was completely focused on it. So around 8 to 10 months later of doing everything I've described there and not spending a penny from the business personally, I was able to save up around 10,000. So I had around £10,000 sitting in the business accounts. That's a combination of the profit account I had and the 20% that got reinvested back into the business, because, you know, there wasn't an awful lot to be spending that on at that point. So although I was terrified at this point that I'd actually met this goal and that the prospect of leaving this steady job to go and work for myself was actually within grasp and common reality, I was terrified, but it was so exciting. Like the goals I'd set myself were there. I had weddings booked in for like the following year. That's kind of how weddings work. Weddings will tend to book in for the following summer or whenever they're getting married. It's not a really short notice thing. So you might book this year for next year. So I had that, I had the money sitting there. I had more than 3 months salary sitting there in total. I had the weddings booked in for the following year, so I had a rough idea of what income to come. And then I'm also thinking, imagine what else I can do with the business in the time that I'll have from giving up my 9 to 5 job. So yeah, when it became around just before the 12 months mark of setting up the business, I handed my notice in. I was leaving full-time employment to become full-time self-employed. And you know what? Most of my colleagues didn't even know that I had a side hustle business. I'd always been really scared to talk about it in case it got me into any trouble with my employer. But I remember handing my notice in and my boss telling me that he envied me. He was a keen photographer as well, which I didn't know. And of course, at my exit interview turned into me giving him this sort of advice that I'm giving you today, telling him how I did it, which was maybe, unbeknown to me at the time, a premonition of what I would end up doing later on in my business journey today, where I now mentor other small business owners via the podcast and of course my mentorship group. So that's what happened. I had met all the goals that I'd set for myself. I had no other reason not to leave, and I left. And oh my gosh, I have never looked back. That was around 11 years ago. I've never been employed since. I've been full-time self-employed since. I earn a full-time income. I have learned so much along the way, but as promised, I want to go back and touch on what I would do differently. So when I talked at the start about being really focused on what I wanted to do, what I would also add in there is being really focused on who I wanted to do it for. Now, my ideal client, without knowing I even had an ideal client at the start, like I said, was anyone who was getting married. If you were getting married, no matter your budget, no matter where you were getting married, I would do your flowers. I'm all in, okay? I'm in. But what that made me was a very busy fool, is the term I've now come to know. And I was attracting lots and lots of budget clients. So whereas I could have did one big wedding for the same equivalent, I was doing 2 or 3 smaller weddings at the weekend and travelling all over the place, and it was exhausting. As I say, it was really hard work, it was really exhausting. I could have made that much easier for myself if I'd been really clear on my ideal client at the very start. But in fairness to me back then, I didn't really know who my ideal client was, so I totally understand when people say that. But I can only share my experience of if I had just even drilled down a little bit. It's fine that your ideal client evolves over the time of your business, as it always does, but even start with somebody in mind. So if I go back to then, how could I have changed that? I would probably have been a bit more savvy in that I would have had some sort of minimum pricing to make it completely worthwhile for me to travel wherever I was going. There probably would have been travel fees, I didn't charge anything like that. Been a bit more savvy about the numbers there to make sure that I was being properly compensated. As I say, my goal at the time was to get out there, get known, get reviews, get pictures of my work, and I did that and it worked. But if I was going back, I would be clearer on who I was wanting to attract. I did a whole video about this actually, I'll link to it in the show notes today, about how that not knowing my ideal client made me a busy fool. Had I got clearer on who my ideal client was at the start, I would have been still busy, but more profitable, and doing less. Yeah? Doing less work for more money, which would have been lovely, and it would have made me get to the goal of going full-time self-employed quicker. Absolutely. So yes, if I could go back and give anyone any advice listening today, get very clear on your ideal client from the start. Even if it's vague, have someone in mind. If you could clone a person and do business with them every day, every week, every month, who would it be? Who are they? Where do they live? Because when I did get round to this, wow, things got easier and more profitable very, very quickly. So yeah, figure out that ideal client avatar. I've got a video all about it that I will post a link to in the show notes. I also have an ebook about it. If you want some guidance on it, the ebook talks you through it start to finish. I will link that in the show notes as well. You actually get the ebook free within my mentorship. So I have a group mentorship, Get Seen, Get Sales. It does what it says in the tin. Get Seen, Get Sales on social media in particular. But you get the ebook free within there. But I'll put all this information in the show notes so that if you are feeling lost in ideal client, you've got complete guidance in the show notes for you today. Next thing, branding. As I said, I put no thought whatsoever into this. I had a friend who was a graphic designer, so I went to him first. Asked him to design me a logo that was nice and colourful and bright and had the Floral Design Boutique on it. He mocked up some ideas. I went with one that was like a wreath around the text, with little birds and flowers and stuff in it. It was really cute. Done. Like, it was just, I liked it. End of. If I could go back and change that again, it would be tied into my ideal client. Everything comes back to your ideal client. And now I know, like, even I've done interviews with Maxine Laceby, who's the co-founder of Absolute Collagen, a multi-million-pound business, and Ben Coomer, who's like a 20 times award-winning business owner. They even at the stage in their business, which is now turning over millions, they still talk about ideal client. That is the driver behind every decision they make, and it should be for us too at any level in business. The good foundation of any business is knowing your ideal client inside out. And so had I known that at the start, had I had an ideal client profile written out, my branding would have been to attract them. So whatever type of weddings I wanted to go for at the start, were they small, intimate, were they large, grand? My branding colours, there's certain colour psychology that talks about how to attract certain, attract trust or attract fun or that kind of thing. Like, we actually did a workshop on this recently with a guest expert in my mentorship. It's fascinating stuff. So yes, branding would not have been so random. The business name, the colours, logos, branding on social medias that I use, it would all have been completely with my ideal client in mind and no one else, not just what I liked. And yes, it would have made the process a lot easier and faster to get to my goals. Social media. So at the time, as I say, social media was kind of the same but different. There was no strategy. My strategy, if you like, was showing up every day, posting every single day, no matter what. Like, I posted every day. And as I say, it worked, it got me out there, but what I was posting was just like pictures of my work and usually just saying, like, drop me a DM to book or whatever. There was no content I was putting out there to attract my ideal clients. There was no content I was putting out there to nurture about, the flowers I was using and the process that I did and how flowers can add to your event and how special they are, how flowers have meanings, all that kind of thing. And there was no specific conversion content. So I was really just posting and praying. Now, did it work? Yes, I got to my goal. Could I have got there a lot faster if I had an actual proper strategy? If I'd gone and got help from a social media expert, a mentor, earlier on in my journey, yes, absolutely. It would have been much easier. It would have been so much clearer. I would have known what to post. I wouldn't have just been posting and praying. My clients would have came to me much faster, and I would have met my goals faster, which was the only goal I had. Yeah, social media was erratic. It was posting and praying. That is not a marketing strategy. If I could go back again, I would have got some help from a mentor, social media mentor, much quicker than I did. The last thing I would go back and change is my pricing. Yep, I was crazy cheap at the start, and it was probably frowned upon by other florists who seen me coming into the industry. I know it would have been, definitely would have been, because someone coming into an industry and undercutting prices undermines the full industry. You know, I know that now. And it's also so much harder to raise your prices later in the game. As I said, I did what I did because my goals were just getting to my goal faster of full-time self-employment as quickly as possible, but also getting experience of working with flowers, doing different designs, getting reviews, getting clients, getting photos of my work. And I thought at that time, because of my own self-doubts, that the way to do that was to undercut. But now if I speak to another small business owner, I had one recently who was setting up an event, and she was like, you know, I'll maybe just do that as a free event or a discounted event. And I'm like, oh, okay, how come? And it was just purely down to her own self-doubt. She didn't think she was worth charging what she knew that event was worth. And I can relate. I did it myself. I can completely relate. I completely understand. But there's so many reasons why that's not good. You're undermining your full industry. You're undermining yourself. You know fine well you're worth that full price. You're also setting your stall out as to how your business will operate. If you're charging £20 for something one month, and then the following month it's up to 50 where it should have been at the start, you're probably going to lose those clients that you worked hard to gain at the start. Just start out as you mean to go on. By all means, you can have introductory prices, of founders' fees, or whatever, but make it clear that that's what it is, and that this is not going to be the price going forward if you decide to do that at the start. The way I started out, very low pricing, not knowing my ideal client. When I did then seek help from a business mentor to try and pull all this together, which wasn't until I had gone full-time self-employed, I realised it all had to change. And so a lot of the clients I worked with in the early days, who maybe would have recommended me to friends and whatnot, probably didn't, because, you know, in their minds they might have thought, she's got her own business now, like she's doing it full-time now, so now she's charging a fortune. But actually I should have been charging that from the start, you know? So it is harder. It's harder to change things. Could that have got me to my goal faster? Yes, absolutely. It's all back to that whole ideal client thing. I would have been less busy and more profitable, which would have got me there faster. Absolutely. So there you have it. This is how I went from full-time employment to full-time self-employment in 12 months, and I have never looked back. I'm 11 years on now. My business adventures have changed so much. I did floristry for a long time, right up until 2020 when the COVID pandemic hit, and also I was pregnant with my twins. Life changed beyond recognition, and my business had to change as well. At that point, I was helping a lot of small business owners in their business because I'd been doing it for quite a while. I'd learned so much along the way, and I shared that a lot. I actually do have another episode all about this. It's called my 10-year pivot, so I'll link to that in the show notes as well if you'd like to have a listen to that next. I think that'll tie in really nicely actually with this episode. Now I spend my time doing the podcast where I can share all of this experience. I can share what I've learned and what I'm still learning with small business owners, in the hope that it gets you to your goals faster and easier than I did. That's always the hope. And of course I have Get Seen, Get Sales, which is my group mentorship for small business owners. It's the most incredible community I've ever come across. It is. We talk about everything in there, marketing. So the main crux of it is to grow on social media. Every week you get a content pack that lands with everything you need to know about posting the next week. You know, write individual posts for every single day of the week. Hooks, prompts, why they work, caption starters, you name it, how to use them in a carousel or a reel, what's the purpose of the post. We talk about ideal client, we talk about strategy for social media, attract, nurture, convert. We've got members in there that now sell out within the hour, you know, no big deal, because they know exactly what you're doing. It's the support that I would have loved to have had at the very start of my business journey. I would love to know know what stage you're at in your journey. Are you just starting out? Are you up and running and you're struggling to grow? Or did you have a similar journey to me? Tell me what stage you're at in your journey of setting up your business. Where are you? I would love to know. Come and find me on Instagram, amandahughes.uk. Drop me a DM. Please do that. Don't think, that I won't answer. I will answer. I would love to hear from listeners of the podcast at what stage you're at in business just now. So come and find me and let me know. Okay, friends, I will leave that with you. This has been a lovely chat with you this morning. I hope it's helped. I hope more than anything it's helped. I hope if there's even one thing you can take away that's going to help you get to your goals of being full-time self-employed faster, then my job is done. Until next time.